Thank you, everyone. We need to start. It is time for us to turn to the task force on the skilled technical workforce. Dr. McCrary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone.
Recording has started.
I'd like to start by reminding everyone that the members of the task force on the skilled technical workforce are Vicki Chandler, Bob Groves, James Jackson, Carl Lineberger, and Jerry Richmond. I'd also at this time like to give a lot of kudos to the STW Skilled Technical Workforce team that has worked for these past couple of years, and particularly for the past few months in starting to gather the data and to put together these draft reports. So I'd like to call out Christina Moranto, Mateo Munoz, Reba Banditabai, Elise Lipkovitz, John Vasey, Kathy Jackert, Chris Blair, Delmarnica Parts, Kim Silverman, Celeste Carter, and Nadine Lim. Thank you all for what you do. This has been a great team of putting this all together. We have a very full agenda this morning, and I'd like to get right to it. First, we need to approve the November 2018, December 2018, and April 2019 meeting minutes. Looking in your board books, are there any changes or corrections needed to these minutes? Hearing no corrections, the minutes stand approved as presented. At this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Karen Marangel, Assistant Director of the Education and Human Resources Directorate, and Ms. Dorothy Aronson, NSF's Chief Information Officer, to the table. And I think what they're going to talk about are NSF's investments in the skilled technical workforce. And, you know, one thing that's very important here is as much people are talking about the STW, and if we think about what NSF has done, just for example, when we talked yesterday about quantum research and the investments that the foundation has made over the past 40 years, and now these things are coming to fruition, I think it's very important to capture and talk about what we have done in the investments that the foundation has made in the STW. Because basically what it does, it helps future-proof our research investments to making sure that we have that workforce that's available when those technologies, whether they be quantum or AI or advanced materials, come forward. They've prepared a brief presentation for us on NSF's investments in the skilled technical workforce and on NSF's Career Campus Challenge. Dr. Marangel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and good to see you all again. As you know, there's a, oops, are we up? All right, I'll start, slides will come. As you know, there's in general a lack of alignment between educational opportunities at all levels and business and industry employee needs. The task force on the skilled technical workforce has taken up issues of education workforce alignment for a very specific sector of workers, those workers who use technical skills in their jobs but do not have a four-year degree. I would like to thank the task force for providing us some of the time and space to reflect on our portfolio of work that we do to support and educate the skilled technical workforce here at NSF. And we recognize that we can organize our efforts into 5 investment areas, which I'm going to briefly describe to you today. I'm going to also show you some illustrative examples within each of these 5 investment areas. And as I talked about yesterday, we have many, many more examples in each, but today I just have a brief amount of time to share some of these with you. Our work here is conducted in the context of several broader policy initiatives, some of which are listed on this slide, and they include the National Council for the American Worker, the STEM Education Strategic Plan, for which I briefed you on yesterday, the NSF Strategic Plan, and some of the board documents on this topic. So one area of investment at NSF dealing with the skilled technical workforce is promoting education and workforce development. And we do this by improving the quality and effectiveness of skilled technical workforce training. Through longstanding programs like ATE and more recent programs like scholarships in STEM or STEM, improving undergraduate STEM education or IUs, and CS for All, which we now know means computer science for all, we have been developing the skilled technical workforce and collecting evidence about how to improve learning and promote interest in STEM among these groups. These examples, again, are just examples. They don't represent everything that we're doing in these investment areas. The next investment area is support for fundamental research to address challenges in STEM interest, learning, and participation, and to develop innovative approaches to ensuring that workers have the skills required for 21st century work. The core research programs in Education and Human Resources Directorate supports both basic and use-inspired research developing theories of learning and teaching for the skilled technical workforce, also including ideas about interest, motivation, and persistence. The Convergence Accelerator pilot, for which Doug provided a briefing on Monday, seeks to build a national talent ecosystem to match workers with work and to support employers in reskilling and retraining their employees for jobs using AI. Any of these examples that you see in blue on the screen are ones that are relatively new to NSF. A third area of investment involves enhancing the national infrastructure for supporting the skilled technical workforce by expanding the capacity for training that is effective and aligned with employer needs. We do this through programs like ATE, of which you are familiar, but also programs like the Science of Learning Data and Tools, which develops fundamental insights into how people learn, including how people learn skills necessary for technicians and technical jobs. Workforce data collection and analysis is another area of investment within NSF. You have heard about the new NCSES initiative to collect information on data gaps and needs for the STW community, and then to implement new data gathering tools to address STW data needs. In addition, we have been collecting data on the STW for many years, including 25 years of surveys in the ATE program that allows us to answer questions about what works for whom under what conditions, and to identify best practices in technician and technical education. And finally, sorry about that. And finally, we also invest in community building through cross-sector collaborative innovation addressing STW challenges. For example, the Community College Innovation Challenge is a prestigious competition where community college teams use science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to innovate solutions to real-world problems, compete for cash awards, and earn full travel support for both students and faculty to attend innovative boot camps here in the DC area. One of the recent Community College Innovation Challenges challenged student teams to develop ways to slow antibiotic resistance, and of which there were some great ideas. Included in community building is, of course, the federal workforce, and NSF is leading innovative activities in this space for our own workforce. Now I will turn to Dorothy Aronson, who will talk about the NSF Career Compass Challenge.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. So why is the Chief Information Officer at the National Science Foundation here talking to you about workforce? A little bit over a year ago, we started investing, as France mentioned, in integrating artificial intelligence into our business process here at the National Science Foundation. And that turned out to be much easier than we thought. It really required three components. One would be the IT, the technology itself, which exists. We're using it all the time, on our phones and whatnot. We needed data, which we had, so that wasn't really a problem. But what we really needed was people to be willing to first implement the solution, but also use it. So there's a lot of resistance, natural resistance to doing things in a different way. And what we found was that although the initial AI project was really embraced readily, which was the automation of certain parts of the select reviewer process. So in our business process, when the program officer has to decide who's going to be on the panel, we have a little tool now that suggests reviewers who might be logical candidates. So that one was very much embraced, but we had to ask ourselves the question, who's going to be displaced as products like this continue to evolve and be inserted into our business process? And you all were talking earlier about bots. Another case where artificial intelligence could very easily be implemented by workers to simplify their own workday and improve the quality of their work, but also reduce their workload in such a way that they may have gaps in their day. So the hardest part of this AI implementation was the workforce. And we asked ourselves the question, the team that was doing this asked ourselves the question, is it possible to use artificial intelligence, these same tools that are displacing work, is it possible to use artificial intelligence to figure out what kind of work people will do instead in the future? So we had the notion, given existing products, unlike advanced research didn't seem to be necessary to solve this problem, would it be possible to take existing products and merge them together so that people could, for example, have on their phone an app that would enable them to enter a bit of information about themselves, project 5 years into the future and say, these are 5 possible jobs that might look interesting to you in the future. Then you would select what you wanted to do, and it would provide career pathing advice. So all of those elements exist separately. And so we thought, well, how do we get this thing to exist here at NSF? And one way to do that would be to spend several $1 million asking a vendor to do that. But then the vendor would be constrained by our imaginations. We would be telling them exactly what we wanted. So what we did instead was we said, can we have a contest? This is very easy to do, and it's going to earn some vendor in the future millions and millions of dollars. So why don't we ask the public to solve this problem for us? And so we did. We launched a contest, and where we are now, and it's a 2-part contest. The first part was just give us your ideas. If you have any idea of how to solve this problem, send it in. We accepted those ideas, and we selected 5 ideas that we really liked, and we posted those 5 ideas on the challenge.gov website, which is available to federal agencies for free. So we've run the whole challenge through challenge.gov. So we posted the first 5 ideas, and we said now where we are is we announced those winners in March. We gave each of the 5 winners $5,000 big dollars. And then what we said is anyone else, so you as the idea people, you can submit solutions, or other people, you can find partners to select solutions. And we decided, we gave them until July to submit a working prototype of the solution. And the winner will get $75,000. One winner will get $75,000 if one exists, if a qualifying winner exists. And so we're just hoping to stimulate the market and stimulate conversations. And it has been a very exciting opportunity for us to engage in the broader work of modernizing the workforce. Are there questions?
By the way, are you finished, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Karen and Dorothy. To open up questions, Jerry?
So I've been reading a lot in the literature these days about the concerns that artificial intelligence has a gender and racial bias to it, particularly because the large data sets that you often access when you're trying to come up with a solution is not representative of the gender and racial distribution of people in the world, or certainly in this country. So what are you doing to make sure that whatever AI your data is based on is not discriminating against underrepresented groups?
Well, the first thing is, with respect to something like suggest reviewers, AI currently, the AI we're using currently only looks at information that exists already. And so you're absolutely right, that information would have a bias. It's very important, and we are expanding that to look broader into to broader data sets. But even so, AI does have that effect. we are not taking humans out of the loop. We're only supplementing a task that was complex before. So it's not intended to fix the problem. The new kinds of AI that are being developed do try to accommodate those problems, but today's artificial intelligence tools, you have to understand the data that you're looking at and the biases that come with that. And we have to, it's our responsibility to warn people about that.
Well, especially when it comes to people thinking about jobs, because we know that, for example, that the algorithms lead to women coming up in search engines, coming up with jobs advertised that are lower paying than men would get.
I think that this will, the notion behind this project is, though, that the second part, the part that looks into the future, is going to be looking at not individuals that have jobs, it's going to be looking at probably information about trajectories of university courseware. It's going to be looking at the job, not the people that hold them today, because the jobs that exist 5 years from now may not even exist today. So what that's trying to do is just predict a kind of work that will be in demand in the future.
Yes. Panch, any question either for Karen or Dorothy?
Yeah. So one of the things that I find that in this description of the automation to people, there are tasks that people are really good at that automation is not yet good at. It'll take several years before we get to that. Mm-hmm. So given that, I think we need to look at the jobs where we can have more human touch with people. And so one thing that we have done in our own institution is automation is where it provides tremendous amount of effectiveness as well as speed. But then you use the people for human touch related activities. That's one thing that we have done. The second thing that has happened is that when things scale, all places scale, so our budgets increase, potentially, hopefully much more than it is right now. And therefore, in our case, for example, we almost doubled the volume of activities that we do, with probably 10% increase in the human touch related activities, and so 10% growth in staff. So these are kinds of opportunities as you reshape. There is this possible of trying to understand in a much more in-depth way. So for us, for example, it could be more interaction with the PIs.
Yes,
right?
absolutely, right.
Time to interact with PI, give them feedback and engage with them much more, give them a positive experience in terms of how the foundation interacts with them.
Spend more time with the non-accepted proposals, for
Exactly.
example,
Spend more time. We talked about it this morning, 80% of the proposals, right?
That's perfect.
And the director was talking about how, when we write letters, they are more anxious to receive feedback.
Right.
And so these are the kinds of things that we should think through in terms of how do we apply human touch in ways that can enhance the user experience.
Right. And so what we try to automate is the parts of the job that people hate, the part that's a grind for them to do. And so for the program officer, that definitely liberates them to do further study or interaction with their customers. So that's exactly right. We hope that in the future, there'll be new jobs that are much more human. It's been said, and I believe, that in the future there'll be more jobs, not fewer, but the jobs will be more oriented towards what's important about the human and what the human can contribute, and what the computers can do, they should do. And so this is why looking 5 years into the future is very important, because it takes time to change your way of thinking and to embrace the future skills that you need. And so it's not looking about placing people today. It's looking about giving them an opportunity to see their own future and making it very easy and a natural part of our work lives. So that's not always part of people's normal DNA.
So the thing that then the associated thing that comes with it is opportunities for people to upskill, reskill, and contextualize their contributions in ways that we can get them more applied to the future. So that's something that professional development opportunity is something that we should think about a lot more now these days. At least that's what we do in our institution.
Dan?
Yeah, I was going to say a version of the same thing. I mean, if you look at the data about where job disruptions are occurring and where the growth opportunities are, they're in these so-called non-routine cognitive jobs, which is to say they require creativity and knowledge. And it's the routine cognitive ones that are those are the automation opportunities. But I think Ponch is right. The real challenge, if you go down that path and you say, okay, that's what's going to happen, then you have to be prepared to give people the skills to be competitive in the non-routine cognitive world. Otherwise, you really have disenfranchised them because you pushed them out.
Right.
Franz?
Just add to this line of discussion. So that's, we know even within NSF, this is happening in real time. So when I go around to the offices, and I talked with Teresa's group not too long ago, and she was telling me about the different tasks that they do in this big office of BFA. And some of the jobs, as we heard in presentations earlier today, are being roboticized, right, mechanized. And so she is looking at a future within NSF for her own office of where people will, gradually the skill set, the work itself is going to be changing. And so the people that we need to do those jobs, they either have to learn the new skills, or as they attrit, we need to bring in new people. So we have examples right here in our own workplace. And that's what one of the tracks, the third track in that Convergence Accelerator that we've shown you a couple of times in this meeting is about. It's asking employers to do just that, to look at the things that can be automated and the things that can't, and how they need to define their own workplace opportunities and the skilling that's necessary in order to make that shift.
Karen, can you go back to that first slide you have? Could you give for the board a context, roughly, of over some time period, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, your estimation of the investment that NSF has made in the STW?
We've done this. Yes, we've done this. Yes, and the director just testified on this last week. So we have really dug into this, and we think it's several $100 million. So we are still kind of digging in and trying to kind of better understand the landscape and understand this. This has been very helpful for us to know that we do a lot in this beyond ATE. So these are many of the examples that were brought to light, and so we think it's several $100 million.
Okay. Hopefully we can kind of converge on that, because I think one thing as we get into the other part of this session is the real excitement about the investment that NSF has made. It's not like we have come, late to the game. So thank you very much. Any other questions for either Karen or Dorothy?
Yeah, can I just make one comment on those numbers? So we have costed all those numbers on the chart, but and it comes out, if we just put numbers beside all of them, about $400 million, today. But you look at the biggest components, and one of the largest, 156 million, is scholarships in STEM. So then you have to ask yourself the next question, well, what is that program really doing? How much of it is going towards what we're talking about here, and how much of it is going to other things? And so that's where, as Karen was giving you a more, nebulous response, because we just, we haven't parsed it that finely. But overall, as you see, there's roughly hundreds of millions of dollars that in principle are going over the entire agency towards what we can call loosely, it's like adding up the number for artificial intelligence. We come out with the number of 500 million that this agency is supporting artificial intelligence. But as you know, that's very, very broadly. It depends on exactly what you put into that bucket.
Bob?
That was useful. I think what I learned on this little group is how important a system viewpoint of this whole domain is. So how the private sector employers have to be part of our vision, community colleges, K through 12, faculty. That's what I didn't know until we had some of these visits, and that's deeply impressive to me. And I hope we end up with, in addition to having these individual things, they're connections among the nodes that are by design. I think that's where if it doesn't exist already, that's where we ought to aspire to be soon, I think.
May I, Vic?
Go ahead, Roger.
One of the things that sort of stands out is our focus on. I mean, really impressed by the work you've done on putting things together of what we have done in the past. I'm increasingly concerned about the areas that I'm not quite sure we covered. I just want to clarify, and that is the rural America, and the rural areas that are losing jobs, the outmigration of continuing outmigration from rural areas to urban areas, and what that does to our resource base in this part of the country that is so essential, and that the area around agriculture and bioeconomy, the kind of things that really are important for the future of the stability of society in that group. And I'm not quite sure how to deal with that yet. It even impacts on what EPSCoR states are. I mean, think about EPSCoR and our concern about how it functions to serve, and the outmigration from states that have not been the innovative states, and how what we do in the skilled technical workforce impacts the future, or predicts or promotes the future of that part of our natural resource base, our natural economy. And that would be helpful for me to know how we're focusing our efforts.
Yeah, so great point. So both within the ATE program, we have several projects that are focused on rural communities, and we are getting together right now an understanding of what else we're doing within EHR, and we do actually do quite a bit in rural. So we have some parts of the Discovery Research K-12 program that are focused on ensuring that students in rural areas have access to STEM education, STEM outreach. And we have a program officer who specifically has taken this up and is working on outreach to rural communities and really understanding the partnerships necessary. So we are kind of simultaneously consolidating all of the work that we're doing in rural communities.
It would be useful for me to see how that connects to or does not connect with EPSCoR, and what we do there. How do we make EPSCoR really work? I mean, EPSCoR still grows numbers of states because we have more outmigration, so we don't have technology developing, and so we say they're poor, and so we're going to give them more EPSCoR money. And that's a concern. It's just a growing number maybe because of outmigration, maybe because of something else. The analysis of that and what the future of how we treat our precious resources of now 8 billion, that's still precious resource. And how do we make sure we serve the American community the most effectively? And they are linked. And they're linked in maybe our accelerators and our SBIRs and our connection to NIH and USDA, because we fuel the knowledge. We are the knowledge base for what creates in those states an economy. And so I think there's a linkage. And maybe there's not, but it's something that we might want to consider, that the future, maybe that's part of the vision, I don't know.
Well, Roger, I would say that would be worth an analysis to look at that, because just knowing where the EPSCoR communities are and where their geographical location, and then the overlap with the workforce components and the workforce development efforts in that would be a good piece. Any other comments from the board? Well, thank you, Karen and Dorothy. Let's turn now to the draft of the STW final report, a copy of which is in your board book. Last week's NSF FY 2020 budget request hearing before the Research and Technology Subcommittee of the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee highlighted that there is a tremendous bipartisan interest in the STW in general and in our report specifically. And for you, Roger, it kind of also goes along these both rural and urban lines. I also at this point just want to call out, and I want to thank both the director and the chair. I watched your testimony. It was really very well done. You fielded the questions, and particularly a lot of questions about the STW. And so for myself and both the team, we thank you for your support there.
Thank you. I have to comment on Roger's thing that was the one question that that question that we just couldn't answer appropriately. And I felt badly about it because, we can talk about some individual programs or efforts within ATE, but somehow that just doesn't cut it. And we were asked about EPSCoR specifically sitting next to the rural community person. And I thought, wow, we just have, so that was the one that I said, we'll get back to you on, So we do. This is a huge opportunity for us to make a difference. It's a great question.
Thank you. At this point, getting the report right entails us using our brand equity effectively and sharpening our language to make sure that we are reaching our target audience and honing our key messages and recommendations. I think if some of you were in the earlier session at 8 o'clock, you know where I'm going with this. We're looking to have the board approve the report no later than NSB's July meeting, and if not, hopefully sooner. I sense that we're somewhere between probably 80 and 85% of having this report done, and we're on their way. The task force has reviewed and commented on 2 previous drafts. Last week, we also received constructive feedback from NSF senior management and from the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics. Given the timing and nature of that feedback, we were unable to incorporate all of those suggestions prior to this meeting, but we're working toward that goal. In terms of organizing our discussion today in the remaining time, I'd like us to start with a series of questions that came out of the NSF feedback. We'll have time at the end to solicit general thoughts on the overall report from the full board. As you may have read in the cover memo in the board book, we have the opportunity to explicitly root the report in the idea that the STW is an integral part of the STEM-capable workforce and, in turn, the overall S&E ecosystem. This is a substantial contribution to the broader policy discussion of the STW. It is also a contribution that leverages NSB's brand equity, specifically its role as an advisory body to Congress and the administration on issues of science and engineering as, as the purveyors of science and engineering indicators. As we look to the next draft, it is important to make sure that our language is in line with the key audiences for this report. I want to make clear that we should not be preaching to those who are involved with the STW on a daily basis. Community colleges, technical schools, and associations that focus on the STW. We don't want to be condescending. They're already well aware of the opportunities and challenges facing this group, which numbers go up to somewhere about 16 million. We can help by raising awareness of the STW with other audiences and further amplifying their messages and creating those emotional memories. I'm going to try to dovetail what Skip Lapia shared with the board today about 8 o'clock in terms of those messages and getting out to as a part of the scientific community, but also who are our stakeholders and really narrowing on those stakeholders and to try to create those emotional memories and moments that will then push them to take action. This draft has been developed with 2 of the board's primary stakeholders in mind. First, our statutory audience, federal policymakers, especially Congress and the administration, and second, 4-year colleges and universities, 2-year colleges, as well as the S&E professional associations. What we have in this report is an opportunity to reach these long-standing NSB, NSF audiences with the message that the skilled technical workforce is an integral part of the STEM workforce, as well as the nation's science and engineering enterprise. This is an opportunity to show some of the interconnections among the STW and various parts of the enterprise, and to highlight the need to think holistically about all parts of this ecosystem, and to encourage that our national dialogue not pit one part against another. Having a well-defined audience is key to ensuring that this report is focused and its tone and pitched appropriately. Task force members, I'm talking to the task force members here, do we have a consensus that the stakeholder groups that were mentioned are the primary audiences for the report? I'll open that up. Task force members? Okay. Other board members, do you concur? Wow. Skip, thank you for the talk this morning. That worked. Okay, so I think there is a consensus that these are the targeted groups that are primary audiences for this report. There are a few other topics that would be helpful for all of us, and I really would like your participation here, both task force members and the full board, because we really need your help. We want to make sure that this report is not a nothing burger, but it is really impactful and really strikes those folks that we want, and that whoever reads this, even besides our targeted stakeholders, realizes that the NSB and the NSF is showing their care about the workforce, wherever they are, whether they're in the cities, whether they're in the country, because we want to take this country from excellence to preeminence. So, given our key audiences, do we have any additional comments on the recommendations? I don't know if you had a chance to look at those recommendations. There's 3 there. Diane?
I need to back up for a second. I was thinking about the audiences, and there's a lot of different audiences, and it will be hard to reach them all with just the same document at the same time. And I think in SEI, where we have companion statements, and I half wonder whether we might need companion statements that go to different audiences in order to be able to take the takeaways for one audience to that audience, rather than try to do all things for all people in one document. I don't know if that's possible.
Let me ask you this. I don't know if you, when you looked at the second draft there, we have some of these call-out boxes. Do you find those sufficient in terms of just like kind of an analog to what we've done in indicators?
I do, actually. I think they do that well, but whether we might also want to extricate and have a couple of one-pagers as well. I don't know. I don't want to add work either, so I'm happy to be overruled here. It's just a thought.
Okay. Julia?
Yeah, along those lines, if I don't know if you personally have seen one of the thematic reports yet, but one thing that we did was have a few key takeaways at the very top, then an executive summary, because many of the stakeholders, that's as much as you're going to get. You're going to get like a page of reading. And, I was just flipping through to try to get to the recommendations and remind myself whether or not I agree with them, and it's not that easy to find them. So thinking about how you can get the key messages up front, and that may be one-pagers, it may be a bit more interpretation, it may be multiple products, but there is also the possibility of having kind of different levels of detail, so that if you have a really busy person, they can take a look at the very front and get at least the general idea.
Thank you, Julia. Any other comments? Moving on, what do you see, and this again a question to both the task force and the board, as critical to include in the next version of this report that would prompt your professional peers to consider and respond to the issues and recommendations raised in the report? And I will say to all of these questions as we start to finish up here, if you don't have anything right now on the spot, please send those comments in to the task force as soon as you can, because I know everybody was up last night reading the report. So, but if you don't, not now, but later, we could use that. And knowing that the clock is ticking, we'd like those more sooner than later, if you can. Also, do you see examples, if you've had a chance in the call-out boxes, to effectively complement the data and other information in the report? And are we telling the stories of understanding the STW and how it fits in the S&E enterprise? Again, drawing back to our session that we had at 8 o'clock this morning, storytelling is very good, but those stories have to be very concise, and they have to be endearing to the reader. So it might be our story, but our story has to be their story. And so I'll just call out, is there anything that you pick up immediately on that before we move on? Okay. Well, thank you. I look forward, again, I'll reiterate, please, when you get a chance, read the draft, look at the call-out boxes. Julia, I appreciate your suggestion. Suggestions like that, is it clear at the top in terms of the recommendations? Is it clear in terms of we all kind of had the buy-in and know where we want to go with the STW and this report, but does it elucidate enough for the people who are going to read this? Okay, and it's not just ourselves. It's not just going to be internally in the NSF, but we know these are going to be people who are policymakers, people on the Hill, but we also want to reach out to folks in industry and other stakeholders who will have the chance to turn the knobs in terms of some of the things we need to do on that. Yes.
Couple of quick requests. One is, could you email the Word document to us? And second, give us a date by which you want responses, please, because otherwise, it falls to the bottom.
I got it. Questions or remarks? Since this is the first time that the full board has had a chance to read the draft, and like I said, I know you all read it last night, and it has changed somewhat since the last version and the task force commented on. Before I close this, are any other final thoughts or issues that you will raise in general or in light of today's conversation, either in terms of delivery, in terms of content, audience, anything else? Vicki.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what both Diane and Julia said. I think we really do need to get a bit more punch at the beginning, and whether that is different for different audiences, I'm not sure. But, I actually hadn't been thinking about that as I was going through reading it. I was just trying to think about, devil in the details in the trenches. And now, once we get the trenches right, we got to step up and really think about the communication. So I just wanted to reinforce that.
On point. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Well, I want to thank you all. The staff team and the task force will get to work on the next draft and plan to get that out for review in the next few weeks. That ends this session. I'd like to hand it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. McCrary. We have a little bit of time now, but I'm wondering whether we can start our next session a little bit early. So if we could start at...
Recording has stopped.
You want to move directly forward, or?
You should wait at least until 1:15, at least 1 minute.
That's right. We need to wait for a minute or two. I have it's 11:14. So we will resume in a couple.